The halls of Prime had never seen humans before. The palace guards stood stiff and silent as the strange visitors walked through the towering gates. Their skin was soft and warm-colored, nothing like the cool lavender flesh of the people. Their eyes held no glow, and their bodies seemed fragile compared to the tall and slender aliens who watched them mass. Jake Harn led the human delegation with steady steps. He was 34 years old, with dark hair cut short and a scar running down his left cheek. He had earned that scar fighting pirates near the outer colonies 3 years ago. His uniform was clean and pressed, but he wore it like a man who had seen real combat. There was no nervousness in his eyes as he looked around the alien palace. He had been in stranger places. A room opened before them like a dream made of glass. Pillars of pale blue crystal rose toward a ceiling so high it seemed to touch the sky. Silver light poured through windows carved in patterns that no human artist could have imagined. At the far end of the room sat Emperor on a throne of white stone. His 4 daughters stood beside him in a perfect line. He had read the brief files on the flight over. The Empire controlled over 200 star systems. They were ancient when humanity was still learning to make fire. But now they needed help. The Dominion was expanding fast, swallowing smaller civilizations. Earth then had a common enemy, and that made them potential friends. He raised one long hand in greeting. His voice echoed through the chamber like wind through a cannon. He spoke of peace and partnership. He spoke of mutual respect between their peoples. Jake listened carefully and kept his expression calm and respectful. Then he saw her. The princess stood slightly behind her sisters. Her name was Larry, according to the files. She was younger than the others, with silver eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. Her lavender skin was a shade lighter than her father's, and her white hair fell past her shoulders like water mid-solid. She was beautiful in a way that Jake had never seen before. It was also staring directly at him. He gave a small polite nod in her direction. It was the kind of gesture he would offer any dignitary, simple and respectful, nothing more. As Larry dropped her ceremonial goblet. Sound of crystal hitting stone rang through the silent throne room. Every head turned toward her. Her sisters looked shocked. Her father paused mid-sentence. The advisors and guards all stared at the princess, who had never once made a mistake during any formal ceremony. His lavender skin turned a deep shade of purple. Her silver eyes went wide with something that looked very much like panic. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She took one step backward, then another. Then she turned and fled from the throne room without a single word of explanation. Silence that followed was heavy and strained. Recovered quickly. He smiled at the human delegation and made a light comment about his daughter not feeling well. The ceremony continued as if nothing had happened, but Jake noticed the confused looks that the other princesses kept exchanging. He noticed the whispers that passed between the advisors. Whatever had just happened, it was not normal. Formal introductions went on for another hour. Jake shook hands and bowed and said all the right things, but part of his mind kept wandering back to the silver-eyed princess who had run away at the sight of him. Had he done something wrong? Was there some human gesture that offended? He could not think of anything. The ceremony, a servant led the human delegation to their guest quarters. The rooms were large and filled with strange alien furniture that was surprisingly comfortable. Jake stood by the window and looked out at the twin suns setting over a forest of crystal trees. Second in command, Lieutenant Amy Santos, walked up beside him. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She had noticed the incident with the princess too. Asked Jake what he thought that was all about. Jake shook his head. He had no idea. Maybe humans just made uncomfortable. They were pretty different looking after all. He did not seem convinced. She had been watching the other during the ceremony. None of them seemed uncomfortable around the humans. Curious, yes, a little cautious maybe, but not uncomfortable. The princess had looked like she had seen a ghost. Agreed that it was strange, but they had bigger things to worry about. The alliance negotiations would start tomorrow, and the fate of 2 civilizations might depend on the outcome. One nervous princess was not his concern. As he lay in his bed that night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, he found himself thinking about her anyway. Those silver eyes filled with sudden panic, that purple blush spreading across her cheeks, the way she had run like something had terrified her. He had faced down enemy ships and hostile aliens and once even a small war. He had never made anyone react like that just by looking at them. The part of the palace, Princess Larry sat alone in her chambers with her head in her hands. Her handmaiden had tried to talk to her, but Larry had sent her away. She needed to be alone. She needed to understand what had happened to her. Seen humans in pictures before. She had read reports about them. They were a young species from a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. There was nothing special about them. Nothing that should have caused her heart to race and her mind to go blank. Nothing that should have made her drop her goblet like a clumsy child. The moment she had looked at the human commander, something inside her had shifted. It was like a door opening in her chest. It was like hearing music she had somehow always known. Her body had reacted before her mind could understand what was happening. Pressed her palms against her eyes and tried to slow her breathing. She was the calm one, the quiet one, the princess who spent her days in the library while her sisters attended parties and diplomatic functions. She did not panic. She did not run. She did not feel things she could not explain. She was feeling them now, and she had no idea why. In private study, Emperor dismissed his advisors and turned to his oldest and most trusted counselor. The old had served the royal family for 300 years. He had seen many strange things. Emperor asked him one simple question. Why did his daughter react that way to the human warrior? The counselor was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke a word that had not been used in the palace for over 1,000 years, a word from ancient texts that most considered nothing more than myth and legend. Soul resonance? Emperor's silver eyes went wide. That was impossible. Soul resonance had not occurred in living memory, and it had certainly never occurred between an and an alien. The counselor nodded slowly. Impossible, yes, but he had seen the look in the princess's eyes. He had seen the way her aura flickered when she looked at the human. He could not explain it, but he knew what he had seen. Emperor turned to stare out his window at the rising moons. This changed everything. This changed absolutely everything. Days passed, and Princess Larry could not escape the human warrior no matter how hard she tried. It seemed like fate was playing a cruel joke on her. Every corridor she walked down, every garden she visited, every quiet corner she sought for refuge, Jake Harmon somehow appeared. First encounter happened in the Eastern Gallery. Larry had gone there to look at the ancient paintings and calm her troubled mind. She was studying a portrait of her great-grandmother when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found Jake standing there with a small notebook in his hand. He smiled at her. It was a simple, friendly smile, nothing more than basic politeness. Felt her heart stop beating for a full second. Her tongue turned to stone in her mouth. She tried to say something appropriate, something a princess should say to a visiting dignitary. What came out was a jumbled mess of sounds that did not form any real words in any known language. Asked if she was feeling better. His voice was warm and gentle, without any mockery or judgment. He nodded so fast that her neck hurt. Then she turned and walked away as quickly as she could without actually running. She could feel his confused gaze on her back the entire way. An encounter happened in the water garden. Larry loved the water garden. The sound of the fountains always helped her think. She sat on a bench beside a pool filled with silver fish and tried to read a book on stellar navigation. She had read the same sentence 15 times when a shadow fell across the pages. Asked if the seat next to her was taken. Larry dropped her book into the pool. Watching horror as the pressed volume sank beneath the surface. Before she could react, Jake had already rolled up his sleeve and reached into the water. He pulled out the dripping book and handed it back to her with an apologetic look. He said he was sorry for startling her. He took the wet book with trembling hands. She could feel the purple blush spreading across her face again. She managed to whisper a thank you before she fled once more. Third encounter was the worst. Larry had hidden herself in a small reading alcove on the third floor of the library. It was a spot she had discovered as a child, tucked away behind shelves of forgotten histories. No one ever came here. She was safe. Or so she thought. Peered at the entrance to the alcove with a surprised look on his face. He said he was exploring the library and got lost. He noticed the books she was reading and asked what they were about. He looked at the stack of volumes beside her. They were all about humans, human biology, human culture, human history, human mating rituals. She had been researching his species for 3 days straight, trying to understand why she reacted to him the way he did. He swept the books off the table and onto the floor. Raised an eyebrow, he knelt down and helped her pick them up. He saw the titles and his expression became thoughtful. He said he was flattered that she was interested in his people. He wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Instead, she stood there frozen while the human warrior gathered her embarrassing research materials and placed them neat back on the table. He did not laugh at her. He did not ask uncomfortable questions. He simply said that if she wanted to know anything about humans, she could just ask him. Then he smiled again and left her alone. She sat in the alcove for another hour, trying to remember how to breathe normally. The evening her handmaiden finally cornered her, had served Larry since childhood. She knew the princess better than anyone except perhaps her own sisters, and she knew that something was very wrong. Asked Larry directly what was happening with the human commander. Tried to deny that anything was happening. Did not believe her for a single moment. She had seen the princess flee from him 3 times in 3 days. She had seen the purple blushes and the staring and the dropped objects. This was not normal behavior for the princess in the royal family. Finally broke down and confessed everything. She told about the strange feeling that had struck her the moment she saw Jake. She described the racing hearts and the foggy mind and the overwhelming urge to run away. She admitted that she had been researching humans because she could not understand what was happening to her own body. Carefully to every word, then she asked a question that made Larry's blood run cold. The princess thinks she might be experiencing soul resonance. Shook her head violently. That was impossible. Soul resonance was a myth. It was a story that parents told children. It was not real. Doubt that Larry was acting exactly like the princesses in those old stories. The sudden recognition, the inability to speak or think clearly, the physical symptoms that appeared whenever the bonded one was near. If it was not soul resonance, then what was it? Larry had no answer. Next morning, Larry made a decision. She would stop running. She would face the human warrior and prove to herself that these feelings meant nothing. She was a princess of the empire. She had studied diplomacy and science and ancient history. She would not be defeated by a simple biological response. On Jake in the Comet training yard, he was practicing with a wooden sword against a training dummy. His movements were smooth and precise, each strike flowing into the next like water. His human body was not as strong as his, but there was a grace to his fighting style that she found beautiful. Watched from behind a pillar for several minutes, then Jake nosed her and waved. She stepped out from her hiding spot. Her hearts were pounding, but she forced herself to walk toward him with steady steps. She was going to have a normal conversation. She was going to prove that she could control herself. Jake lowered his practiced sword and smiled at her. He said it was nice to see her not running away for once. He felt the familiar heat rising to her cheeks, but she held her ground. She asked him about his sword technique. It was different from style. Explained that it was based on an ancient earth martial art. He had learned it from his grandfather, who had been a champion in his youth. He offered to show her some basic moves if she was interested. For almost an hour, Jake did most of the talking at first, sharing stories about his home plan and his military career. Slowly, Larry began to relax. She asked questions. She even laughed at one of his jokes. Her hearts were still racing, but her mind was clear for the first time since they had met. Jake reached out and touched her hand to demonstrate a sword grip. Rational thought in Larry's head vanished instantly. She stared at his warm fingers against her cool lavender skin. She forgot how to speak. She forgot how to move. She forgot everything except the electricity that seemed to flow from his touch into her very soul. Jake asked if she was okay. Pulled her hand back like she had been burned. She made some excuse about having somewhere to be. Then she turned and walked away as fast as her legs could carry her. And her, Jake watched her go with a puzzled expression. He was starting to suspect that something much stranger than cultural differences was going on here. And despite his best efforts to focus on the mission, he could not stop thinking about the shy alien princess with the silver eyes. A library of Prime contained books that were older than human civilization itself. Larry had spent most of her life among these shelves, reading histories and scientific texts and philosophical debates from 1,000 different worlds. But tonight, she was searching for something she had always believed was fiction. Found the ancient texts on soul resonance in a forgotten corner of the restricted section. The books were covered in dust so thick that she had to wipe them clean before she could read the titles. No one had touched them in centuries. Why would they? Soul resonance was just a fairy tale. Carried the books to a private reading room and locked the door behind her. She lit a single crystal lamp and began to read. First book described soul resonance as a biological phenomenon unique to the species. Long ago, before the Empire expanded to the stars, had developed an ability to recognize their perfect genetic match through a form of psychic connection. The bond was instant and permanent. Once triggered, it could never be broken or transferred to another person. The second book contained personal accounts from who had experienced soul resonance. They described feelings that matched exactly what Larry had been experiencing. Racing hearts, foggy thoughts, the inability to speak clearly, the overwhelming sense of recognition as if meeting someone they had always known but never seen before. The third book made Larry's stomach drop. Explained that soul resonance was considered extinct. The ability had faded as the species evolved and spread across the galaxy. The last recorded case had occurred over 1,000 years ago. Scientists believed that the gene responsible for the bond had become dormant in the modern population. The book also contained a warning. In rare cases, the gene could reactivate spontaneously. When this happened, the resonance was even stronger than in ancient times. The bonded individual would find it impossible to function normally around their match partner. The symptoms would only get worse until the bond was acknowledged and accepted. I closed the book with shaking hands. Could not be happening. She was bonded to human, an alien from a species that had only recently discovered space travel. Her family would be scandalized. The court would be outraged. Her sisters would never let her forget it. Worst of all, Jake had no idea. He probably thought she was simply strange or mentally unstable. He had no way of knowing that her biology had decided, without her permission, that he was her perfect match. He put her head down on the table and tried not to cry. Stayed in the reading room until the twin moons rose high in the sky. Then she gathered the books and hid them in a cabinet where no one would find them. She could not let anyone else discover what she had learned, not until she figured out what to do about it. Left the library through a side door and walked through the quiet palace quarters. Most of the servants had gone to bed. The only sounds were her own soft footsteps and the distant hum of the client system. Found Jake sitting alone on a balcony that overlooked the crystal forest. Ari froze in the doorway. She had not expected to find him here. This was her private thinking spot, a place she came when she needed to clear her mind. How did he know about it? Turned and saw her standing there. He smiled and gestured for her to join him. He said he hoped she did not mind. He had found the place while exploring and thought it was beautiful. His first instinct was to run, but she was tired of running. She was tired of hiding, and she was tired of fighting against something that seemed to be beyond her control. Walked out onto the balcony and sat down beside him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked out at the glittering forest under the silver light of the moons. The silence was surprisingly comfortable. It broke at first. He said he had noticed that she seemed nervous around him. He wanted her to know that he meant no harm and no offense. If he had done something wrong by human or standards, he would like to know so he could fix it. She shook her head. He had done nothing wrong. The problem was entirely with her. He asked what kind of problem. Hesitated. She could not tell him the truth. The truth was too strange and too complicated and too embarrassing. But she found that she wanted to talk to him anyway. She wanted to know more about the person that her ancient genes had chosen for her. Asked him about Earth. She asked about his family and his childhood and how he became a warrior. She answered every question with patience and warmth. He told her about the small town where he grew up, surrounded by forests that were green instead of crystal. He told her about his parents, who were both heroes. He told her about joining the military after his sister was killed in a pirate raid, and how he had spent the last decade fighting to protect other people from the same pain. Turn, life found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. She talked about growing up in the shadow of her more confident sisters. She talked about finding peace in books and solitude. She talked about feeling like she did not belong in the political world that her family inhabited. Jake listened to every word. He did not judge or interrupt. He just listened. Finished, he said something that surprised her. He said he understood exactly how she felt. Being human among aliens, being a soldier among diplomats, he always felt like he was standing slightly outside the world everyone else lived in. Maybe that was why he had been drawn to the balcony. It felt like a place for people who did not quite fit anywhere else. Looked at him with new eyes. Perhaps her biology knew something that her conscious mind did not. Perhaps this human warrior understood her better than anyone in her own species ever had. Wanted to tell him the truth then. The words were right there on the tip of her tongue. She wanted to explain soul resonance and what it meant and why she had been acting so strangely. She wanted him to know that her body had chosen him, even if her mind was still catching up. Fear held her back. What if he rejected her? What if he was disgusted by the idea of being bonded to an alien? What if telling him ruined everything? Instead, she just sat with him in comfortable silence, watching the moon travel across the sky. For the first time since they had met, she felt calm in his presence, not because her feelings had faded, but because she was no longer fighting them. When the first sun began to rise, Jake stood and offered her his hand. He said he should get some sleep before the negotiation resumed, but he hoped they could talk again soon. Took his hand and let him help her to her feet. The touch sent electricity through her body, but she did not pull away this time. She held his hand for just a moment longer than necessary. She watched him walk back into the palace, and she knew that she was in serious trouble. The bond was growing stronger. Her feelings were growing deeper, and sooner or later she would have to tell him the truth. What happened after that was entirely up to him. Next morning, Larry's eldest sister cornered her in the breakfast room. Was the crown princess, tall and stern and always aware of everything that happened in the palace. She had noticed the connection forming between Larry and the human warrior. She had questioned. And warnings. Larry that whatever she was feeling for the human needed to stop. Such an attachment would cause scandal throughout the empire. It would damage their father's reputation. It would make Larry a target for mockery and criticism. She needed to maintain proper distance from the human delegation. She listened to her sister's words with a singing heart. She wanted to explain that she had no choice. She wanted to reveal the truth about soul resonance, but she knew would not understand, and never felt anything she could not control. Larry simply nodded and promised to be more careful. She knew, even as she made the promise, that she could not keep it. The bond would not allow her to stay away from Jake, and her heart, it seemed, had already made its choice. The celebrating banquet was meant to mark the successful completion of the alliance negotiation. The great hall was decorated with flowers from 100 different worlds. Musicians played soft melodies that blended in human tradition. Servants moved through the crowd carrying trays of exotic foods and sparkling drinks. Stood near the back of the room, trying to stay out of sight. Her sister had made it very clear that she should avoid the human delegation tonight, but her eyes kept finding Jake across the crowded hall. He was talking to her father's advisors, looking confident and comfortable in his formal military uniform. Every few minutes, his gaze would scan the room until it found her. Every time their eyes met, life felt her heart skip. She was so focused on Jake that she almost missed the warning sign. The servant who moved a little too stiffly, the guard whose uniform did not quite fit right, the advisor who kept glancing toward the exits with nervous eyes. It was Jake who noticed first. He was in the middle of a conversation when his body suddenly went tense. His hand moved to his hip where his weapon would normally hang, but there was a formal celebration and weapons were not permitted. Everything happened very fast. False servants drew hidden blades from beneath their trays. The disguised guard pulled out an energy weapon. The nervous advisor threw something small and round toward the center of the room. Explosion knocked Larry off her feet. Hit the ground hard and lay there stunned, her ears ringing and her vision blurred. Around her, she could hear screaming and the sound of fighting. The air smelled like smoke and blood. One grabbed her arm and pulled her behind an overturned table. She looked up and saw Jake crying beside her. His face was grim and focused. There was blood on his forehead from a cut, but he did not seem to notice. Asked if she was hurt, Larry shook her head, still too dazed to speak. He told her to sit down. Then he picked up a decorative metal rod from the floor and went to join the fight. It was through a gap in the wreckage as Jake moved through the chaos. He fought like nothing she had ever seen. The assassins were trained killers, but Jake was something else entirely. He moved between them like water, blocking strikes and delivering counterattacks with deadly precision. He was not as strong as them, not as fast, but he predicted their movements before they made them. He found openings that should not have existed. He took down 3 of them before they even understood what was happening. But there were too many. Assassins emerged from the crowd. They had planned the attack carefully. They had weapons in numbers and the element of surprise. The guards were fighting bravely, but they were scattered and confused. He was pushed back toward where Larry was hiding. He was breathing hard now, and she could see new wounds on his arms and chest, but he kept fighting. He would not give up. Larry saw the assassin coming up behind him. The warrior moved silently through the smoke. He held a long curved blade that gleamed with poison. Jake was focused on the enemies in front of him. He did not see the danger approaching from behind. He tried to shout a warning, but her voice was lost in the noise. The assassin raised his blade. Something inside Larry broke open. He did not think about what she was doing. She did not plan or hesitate. She simply reached out with a part of her mind that she had kept locked away since childhood. The assassin flew backward as if struck by an invisible giant. He crashed through a stone pillar and did not get up again. She stood up from behind the table. Power crackled around her hands, visible as arcs of silver light. She could feel the fear and confusion of everyone in the room. She could sense every heartbeat, every breath, every spark of life. He had always known she had telekinetic abilities. Most royals did. But she had never used them, never trained them, never wanted them. They felt too violent, too dangerous for a quiet princess who preferred books to battles. Jake was in danger, and nothing else mattered. Maying assassins turned toward her. They recognized the threat she posed. They abandoned their other turrets and charged at her with weapons raised. I met them without fear. One into the wall with a thought. She pulled the weapon from another's hand and turned it against him. She created a barrier of force that blocked a rain of energy blasts. She moved through the battlefield like a storm, protecting her family and her people with powers she had never fully understood. Her eyes kept finding Jake. Her powers were strongest when she was protecting him. The fight ended as quickly as it had begun. The last assassin fell, and the great hall went silent except for the groans of the wounded and the distant wail of alarm bells. Soldiers poured in through every entrance, far too late to help. Her let the power fade from her hands. She felt drained and shaky like she had run 1,000 miles. She looked around the ruined hall and saw her father standing unharmed with his guards. She saw her sisters helping the wounded. She saw Jake. He was on the ground. Ran to him and dropped to her knees beside his body. The assassin's poisoned blade had found its mark after all, cutting deep into his side just before Larry had thrown the attacker away. Blood soaked through his uniform and pooled on the floor beneath him. His eyes found hers. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace of pain. He said she was amazing. He said he had never seen anything like that. He pressed her hands against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Tears streamed down her face, turning silver in the lamplight. She told him to stop talking. She told him he was going to be fine. She begged him not to leave her. He reached up and touched her cheek with blood-stained fingers. He asked her why she was crying for him. They barely knew each other. Finally, with her heart breaking and her world falling apart, Larry told him the truth. Told him about soul resonance. She explained that it was an ancient bond that chose partners across time and space. She confessed that her biology had recognized him the moment she saw him. She admitted that she had been fighting it for days because she was scared. Scared of rejection. Scared of scandal. Scared of loving someone who might not love her back. He listened to every word. His breathing was shallow and his face was pale, but his eyes never left hers. She finished, he smiled. A real smile this time despite the pain. Told her that he had felt it too. From the first moment he saw her, something in his chest had recognized her. He had thought he was imagining things. He had thought it was just attraction to a beautiful alien princess. But now he understood. Whatever she was feeling, he was feeling it too. Larry sobbed and held his hand. Hills arrived then and pushed her aside. They surrounded Jake with glowing instruments and urgent voices. Larry watched them work, praying to God she had never believed in. Had finally told him the truth. She had finally admitted what she felt. Now she could only hope that he would survive long enough for it to matter. And her, Emperor stood watching his daughter with an expression that mixed surprise and understanding. He had heard her confession. He had seen her unleash powers that she had hidden for 20 years. He knew that everything was about to change. Days passed in the healing chambers of the royal palace. 7 days of Larry sitting beside Jake's bed, leaving only when the healers forced her to eat or rest. 7 days of watching machine breathe for him while his body fought against the poison that had entered his blood. He was toxin designed to kill. It was not supposed to work on humans. But Jake's body was still fragile by galactic standards, still vulnerable in ways that alien biologies were not. The healers did everything they could, but they warned Larry that the outcome was uncertain. The 8th day, Jake opened his eyes. He was asleep in a chair beside his bed when it happened. She woke to the feeling of fingers tightening her hand. She looked up and found him watching her with a weak smile on his pale face. She looked terrible. When was the last time she slept in an actual bed? Laughed and cried at the same time. She threw her arms around him and held him as tightly as she dared without hurting his wounds. She told him he was an idiot for almost dying. She told him she would never forgive him if he scared her like that again. He held her back with what little strength he had. He said he would try to be more careful in the future. Those came rushing in when they heard voices. They checked Jake's vital signs and declared that he was past the danger point. The human would survive. They praised his species' remarkable will to live, their stubborn refusal to die when any sensible biology would have given up. Stayed by his side as he recovered. They talked for hours every day, learning everything about each other that they had not yet discovered. She told him about her childhood fears and her secret dreams. He told her about the sister he had lost and the guilt he still carried. They argued about philosophy and laughed at silly jokes and sat in comfortable silence when words felt unnecessary. I was buzzed with rumors about the princess and the human warrior. Everyone had seen her fighting to protect him during the attack. Everyone had heard whispers about her tearful confession. The servants gossiped. The nobles speculated. Her sisters watched with varying degrees of shock and concern. Larry no longer cared what anyone thought. Weeks after the attack, Emperor summoned them both to his private chamber. He was still weak, but he insisted on walking there under his own power. Larry supported his arm as they made their way through the crystal corridors. She could feel his heartbeat through his sleeve, steady and strong despite everything he had been through. Emperor's private chambers were smaller than the throne room but far more beautiful. Ancient artifacts lined the walls. Living crystal plants grew in pots of silver light. Sat in a simple chair by the window, looking older and more tired than Larry had ever seen him. He gestured for them to sit, and he told them what he had learned about soul resonance. Ancient texts were clear. Soul resonance was sacred to the people. It represented a bond that transcended choice and circumstance. Those who experienced it were blessed by the universe itself. To deny the bond was considered a grave sin in the old religion. That he had expected to be angry when he first heard about his daughter's connection to the human. He had expected to forbid the relationship and demand that Larry maintain proper distance from the visiting delegation. Watching her fight for Jake during the attack had changed his mind. He had seen the power she unleashed. He had seen the courage she found. He had seen his quiet, shy daughter transform into something fierce and beautiful. And he had realized something important. Resonance did not happen by accident. The universe had chosen Jake for Larry for a reason. Perhaps it was a sign that the alliance between humans and was meant to be. Perhaps it was proof that the two species could be more than political partners. Perhaps it was simply time for the Empire to embrace change. Larry that he would not stand in her way. If she wanted to pursue the bond with the human warrior, she had his blessing. He would deal with the nobles and the scandal and the centuries of tradition that said otherwise. Felt tears rolling down her cheek again. She rose and embraced her father, something she had not done since she was a child. His daughter and looked over her shoulder at Jake. He told the human that he had proven himself worthy during the attack. He had fought bravely and shed blood defending the royal family. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he had earned his place in their world. He bowed his head in respect and gratitude. Formal tree signing took place 1 week later. The Great Hall had been repaired and redecorated. Representatives from both Earth and gathered to witness the historic moment. Cameras broadcast the event to 100 different worlds. The real story was not the treaty. He walked into the hall with her hand in Jake's. She wore a gown of silver and white that matched his formal uniform. Her head was high and her steps were steady. There was no trace of the shy princess who had dropped her goblet and fled from the throne room just weeks ago. The crowd fell silent as they entered. Nobles who had expected scandal found themselves looking at something else entirely. The princess moved with grace and confidence. The human warrior stood tall and proud beside her. They looked at each other with a tenderness that needed no explanation. The princess watched her sister with an expression that slowly shifted from disapproval to reluctant respect. She had warned Larry that the attachment would cause trouble, but looking at them now, she could not deny that they belonged together. Signed the treaty with a flourish. Earth and were now formally allied against the Dominion. Trade routes would open. Military cooperation would begin. Two civilizations would learn from each other and grow stronger together. Knew that the true alliance had already been formed. Not on paper or in negotiations, but in the bond between his daughter and the human who had captured her hearts. After the ceremony, Jake accepted a new position. He would remain on Prime as the official human liaison to the royal court. It was a diplomatic title, but everyone understood what it really meant. He would stay close to Larry. He would be part of her world now. At night, they stood together on their balcony, overlooking the crystal forest. The wind moons hung bright in the sky. The distant lights of the city sparkled like earthbound stars. Leaned against Jake's shoulder and felt his arm wrap around her. Her hearts beat in perfect rhythm with his single one. She was calm in his presence now, not because her feelings had faded, but because she no longer feared them. She had found her place. She had found her person. She had found the courage to be something more than a shy princess hiding in libraries. Jake asked her if she was happy. He looked up at him and smiled. It was the first smile that came easily to her in his presence. No panic, no blush, just warmth and love and certainty. Told him that she had never been happier in her entire life. Kissed her forehead gently. Then he held her close as the moon traveled across the sky, and the first light of dawn began to paint the crystal trees in shades of gold and rose. The shy alien princess had found her human warrior, and against all odds, against tradition and expectation and the vast distance between their worlds, they had found each other. The universe, it seemed, had known what it was doing all along.